There's only 7 days left until I ride Colorado's gnarliest bike park. My V10 Ultimate Park build still isn't finished. I've got one more big upgrade to dial it in. This is Countdown to Colorado. All right, so the whole time I've been building and upgrading this V10, I've kept it on stock suspension. This bike started as the base model and I wanted to dial it in as much as possible before swapping parts so I could really understand how it rides with the stock setup. But after all that testing, I've come to a conclusion. This RockShox Boxer Select isn't cutting it. Don't get me wrong, it works, it's capable, but the adjustments feel unpredictable. The range is very broad and one click will make a massive change. The next time I turn it, it does nothing. Also, small bump compliance, not great. And even after 10 hours of testing, I think that this fork is holding this bike back. Yeah, you can call me picky, but I'm chasing perfection here, and the new fork should completely transform the feel of the whole bike. So this is the big moment, the fork upgrade. It's taken a lot of restraint not to install the new fork. It's been in my shop since July, and I wanted to throw it on right away. But I didn't want this build to look like I'm just buying performance. I gave the Boxer Select a fair shot, I put in the hours, and only now does it feel right to upgrade. All right, with that removed, let's check out the brand new fork. This is a Manitou Dorado Pro. Retail price $1,949. Now, if you're newer to the sport, the Dorado might not ring a bell, but back in 2003, this thing made history. Greg Minnaar, aboard his Intense-built, Haro-branded bike, won his first world championship using the Manitou Dorado. The same year, Cedric Garcia took it to Red Bull Rampage and pulled the first ever backflip in Rampage competition using the Dorado. Over 20 years later, this fork still has original Dorado DNA. They're both still inverted forks and both have full carbon upper tubes. Manitou claims that this carbon saves about a half pound over aluminum and actually adds stiffness, and the fact that they've been doing inverted forks over 20 years gives me the confidence that they have this fork absolutely dialed. Installing a fork is easy with the right tools, but this fork install had me on edge. Obviously, this is a crazy expensive fork and I do not want to mess it up. Installing a dual crown fork is much different than I'm used to. It didn't help that I couldn't find an installation guide on the Manitou site. I was like Googling torque specs, looking for videos, couldn't find anything. Then I finally dug deeper and found a Manitou guide buried in their website. After that, it seemed like the installation was going to be an easy swap. I knew that there was going to be a compatibility issue because the minimum rotor size of this fork is 203, and I'm running a 220 rotor. Luckily, they make plus 17mm adapters, so I thought this was going to be an easy install. That was until... Oh no! I just found out that this hydraulic hose is too short, especially with having to route it on the stanchion guard there, and that's not gonna fly, especially with last episode having some brake issues. So luckily I have a replacement Shimano hydraulic hose on hand, but I was not expecting to do that. Sometimes these upgrades never go smoothly. I wanted to make this as painless as possible, and I wanted to avoid leaking out all the fluid from the caliper and lever. So I used 2 syringes on both sides, hopefully to hold a vacuum, and it pretty much worked. I'm sure we've all been there, doing any kind of brake job and just ending up making a huge mess, spending way more time than you want. But I feel like I've worked on a lot of brakes this year, and I'm starting to learn the little tricks here and there. So from there, I just did a full bleed, and these brakes are good to go. I did try to reinstall the number plate, but the front hose would have rattled like crazy, so I decided to just leave it off. And that's going to be the theme moving forward in this video. I want to silence the bike and reduce as much rattling as possible. With that all mounted, this bike just looks amazing. I'm super glad I went with the Dorado. It just has that unique vibe, and I don't think I could have got that with a Fox 40. But here's where things get a little tricky. The air side has 2 chambers to pump up. The top one, I couldn't use my shock pump unless I took the bars off. I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong there or if there's some special right angle shock pump out there. If you know, leave a comment. But the other air chamber is called IRT, Infinite Rate Tune. This lets you tune how progressive it feels. So if you want it to ramp up and support more at the end of the stroke, you add more air in the IRT. I'm hoping that means it'll be super soft off the top because I imagine Trestle has a ton of high-speed chatter, which I am dreading to deal with after that last crash. When it comes to settings, a high-end fork has a lot of them to fiddle with. Fortunately, there's just one rebound knob, which I like, but this one is super stiff to turn. Hopefully that loosens up some. There's also high and low speed compression, which is essential. Definitely going to be adding a lot of low speed compression for all the jump lines and trestle. But with that all wrapped up, it's time for the final tweaks to complete this ultimate park build once and for all. Whew. First up is the O-chain. It's basically a fancy spider for your chainring, designed to reduce pedal kickback and quiet down the bike. In theory, that makes your suspension feel smoother since your feet aren't fighting chain tension. But honestly, it's hard to tell if that's real or just marketing. What I do notice is the quiet. No more clunk every time the chain tugs. So while it costs a lot for such a small part, if it makes the bike calmer and quieter, maybe that's worth it. Next, the brake pad rattle is real bad and a known issue with the Shimano Saints. A bunch of you gave me great tips to fix it, and turns out I already had something that might work, 3M mastic tape. So I cut a little strip and stuck it on top of the caliper, right where the cooling fins keep tapping and making that noise. People said to get different pads without the cooling fins, but I already spent $60 each for the pads, so I'm gonna try this before spending even more money. And last up, Cush Core. I'm still rocking that sliced tire with a plug, which is honestly shocking it's held up this long. I'll be bringing a couple spare tires to Trestle, but I wanted extra insurance. So time for the dreaded Cush Core install with DH casings. If you've done this before, you know it's basically a battle. The first fight was just getting the insert over the rim. I eventually gave up and moved to the floor because I knew this was gonna get ugly. I even took off the rotor to avoid contamination with sealant. Ideally, I would have installed the tire with sealant in there, but I just could not do it. So I dumped it out and tried the good old trash can method for extra leverage. The real trick is keeping the beads in the center channel and just massaging them in over and over. After spending way too much time wrestling, I went to inflate it, and of course, the bead didn't seat. No idea why, but it eventually popped in, but not before leaving me with a nice mess to clean up. Man, Cush Core with a DH casing tire is quite the workout. I am all sweaty, man. But with that all wrapped up, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the completed Santa Cruz V10 Ultimate Park Build. There we go, way quieter. Hopefully no more rattling in the trestle video, but I can't believe the upgrades added 1.5 pounds. Normally, this part in the video, I'd be testing the new bike setup, but there's a problem. In the last video, I had that silly crash, and that was actually 2 weeks ago because last weekend I went to a wedding in California. At first, I was worried about my thumb and wrist, but that's actually healed 100%. But it turns out it's my shoulder that hurts. And when I fell, I think my shoulder wanted to dislocate or something. And now I have pain in the back of my delt. But after a week, I started thinking that maybe my trip should be canceled. but I took my Ripley out just to test some things, and my strength was fine, the stability was fine, but after about an hour, dull pain started to set in. So I think it's best that I continue resting the shoulder, doing rehab exercises, and no riding in this video, but the trestle trip is still on. I'm flying out in just a few days, and I'll just have to work through the pain. So if you want to hear my thoughts on this amazing fork or the completed build, you're just gonna have to tune in next week.